Today, we're going to explore a haunting true story hidden behind one of the most iconic photos in criminal history. This case was actually suggested by one of our viewers a few months ago. And dear friends, before we dive into today's story, let's talk for a moment about burgers. Probably one of the quickest and most convenient meal choices for many of us during busy days. That's why I hope that after hearing the story of Joe Metheny, you won't let certain associations mess with your appetite. If you're wondering why, stick around until the end of the video. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. And now, let's jump into today's case. Joe Metheny was born in 1955 in Baltimore, Maryland. His father died in a car accident when he was just 6 years old. He grew up in poverty alongside 6 siblings. Joe claimed that his mother, Zhang, was neglectful and often sent him to live with other people. However, Jean insisted that she always did her best to care for her children, even while working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. In his teenage years, Metheny was once a fairly good student, well-behaved and decent, but over time, he grew distant from his family and eventually fell into addiction. At 18, he joined the military, but after being discharged, his life spiraled even further as he became addicted to heroin and wandered the streets of Baltimore. In 1973, Metheny enlisted in the U.S. Army. However, stories about this chapter of his life are filled with contradictions, especially when compared to his mother's account. Both Metheny and his mother confirmed that he was stationed in Germany during his service, but Metheny also claimed that he fought in Vietnam, a detail his mother said she knew nothing about. Military records show no evidence that he was ever deployed to Vietnam, casting serious doubt on his version of events. Still, Metheny insisted that he became addicted to heroin while serving in an artillery unit, the same unit he claimed had taken him to Vietnam. His time in the military also marked a growing rift between him and his mother. By the time he left the service, they had completely lost contact with each other. Zhang later shared, "He just drifted away from me over time. I think the worst thing that ever happened to him was heroin." It's a very sad story. In addition to heroin, Metheny was also a heavy drinker. Despite his large frame standing at 6 feet 1 inch, he was ironically nicknamed Tiny by those who knew him. After leaving the military, Metheny returned to South Baltimore. Still deeply consumed by drugs and alcohol, he lived a transient life, drifting between bars and homeless encampments, never staying in one place for long. Despite all this, he managed to hold down jobs, operating forklifts, driving trucks, and even working in woodworking shops. He also met a woman and had a child with her. Sadly, she was also an addict. However, as he approached 40 and prepared to become a father, Metheny was determined to turn his life around. After some time away from his wandering lifestyle, he tried to build a home with his wife and their 6-year-old son. But his job as a truck driver meant he was often away from home. Then one day, after returning from a long trip, Metheny was shocked to find that his wife and son had left. A furious rage exploded inside him. He hated his ex-wife, believing he had been betrayed, and swore he would get revenge for losing his only son. Metheny once claimed that if his ex-wife had brought their son to his mother's house, things would have been different, but since she didn't, he believed she had to pay the price. He spent days desperately searching for any sign of his ex-wife, suspecting she had run off with a homeless man. He scoured motels, makeshift camps, and even dark underpasses, places he knew she frequented to buy drugs. Alongside the despair of searching for his son, Metheny sank deeper into his addiction, losing the home he had just started to build. He returned to a homeless camp called Tent City, continuing to ask drug dealers for any information about his wife and child, but all in vain. It was during this dark period that Joe Metheny committed his first murder while working as a truck driver for Pallet Joe Stein Sons. Metheny met Catherine Ann Magaziner, a 39-year-old woman. He lured Catherine into a trailer parked at the company. Metheny then attacked her, causing her death, and buried her body in a shallow grave in a nearby wooded area. Even more disturbing, 6 months later, he returned to the grave to dig up the body. Taking the victim's head, clothes, and wallet, he reburied the clothes and wallet in different locations, but placed the head in a box and discarded it. Later on, Metheny discovered that his ex-wife had left with another man. He learned that not only was this man arrested for drug possession, but he also forced Metheny's ex-wife into prostitution. In the end, Metheny's son was placed in an orphanage. With his history of addiction and a criminal record, Metheny believed that winning custody of his son was impossible. Instead of trying to turn his life around and prove he could be a responsible father, he gave up, convinced he had lost his son for good. Metheny decided to hunt down and kill his ex-wife and her lover as an act of revenge. Eventually, he learned they were planning to go to Hanover Street to buy drugs. After being released, he took an axe from the camp and went there to lie in wait. However, when he arrived, Metheny didn't find the couple. Instead, he encountered Randall Brewer and Randy Piker, 2 men who were high on drugs. Rage flared up inside Metheny. He approached and woke Brewer and Piker to interrogate them. In their dazed state, Brewer and Piker tried to explain that they had been using drugs with his ex-wife under the bridge, but she had already left. Unsatisfied with their answer, Metheny raised the axe and struck the 2 men repeatedly until they stopped breathing. But his crimes didn't stop there. Right after killing Brewer and Piker, Metheny went after 2 other women. First, he lured a prostitute to Hanover Street, promising heroin in exchange for information about his ex-wife. But when he realized she couldn't provide any useful information, he forced himself on her and then killed her. Then, using the same tactic, he lured another prostitute to the same location and brutally murdered her. Metheny confessed that while dragging the second woman's body into the bushes, where he had hidden his first victim, he suddenly spotted a man fishing nearby. Fearing he might be discovered, Metheny grabbed a steel pipe from the roadside and approached the man. He lunged forward, swinging the pipe repeatedly at the man's head until the victim collapsed. He later confessed that he had tied rocks to the bodies of the 2 women and the unfortunate man, then threw them into the Patapsco River from the Hanover Street Bridge. He meticulously erased all traces at the scene. In just 7 hours, Joe Metheny took the lives of 5 people. Later on, he casually referred to it as a busy night, asterisk. Not long after, on February 8, 1995, the bodies of Randall Brewer and Randy Piker were found, along with another victim, Everett Dowell. At that time, the homeless community was on edge, with 2 rival groups frequently clashing. Police quickly arrested 31-year-old Larry Amos, suspecting him of involvement in Everett Dowell's case. About 2.5 weeks later, Joe Metheny was arrested on charges of murdering Randall Brewer and Randy Piker. He was held without bail for 11 months before going to trial. However, in July 1996, Metheny was unexpectedly acquitted and released. The main reason was that the murder weapon, the axe Metheny used to attack the 2 homeless men, had been found by Amos. Amos had used that same axe to kill Everett Dowell, contaminating crucial evidence. With the key evidence compromised, the court lacked sufficient grounds to convict Metheny. Amos later pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. But he only served 1 year and 9 months thanks to a reduced sentence. After getting out of jail, Metheny reached out to his former employer at Pallet Joe Stein Sons. He convinced the company to rehire him as a night security guard and forklift operator. Not only that, he was also given a trailer on the company grounds to live in. By this point, taking lives had become second nature to Metheny. While his earlier murders could be explained by rage fueled by drugs, blind jealousy, and attempts to cover up his crimes, now he actively hunted victims just to satisfy his cruel pleasures. As soon as he returned to work at the company, Metheny realized that prostitutes were ideal targets for his crimes. He could easily lure them to his private trailer without facing much resistance. At the same time, the chances of anyone reporting them missing were very low. Moreover, the pallet company was located at the end of a dead-end road, backed by dense woods, making it an ideal spot to dispose of bodies. Later, in a confession letter, Metheny admitted that he had lured 2 prostitutes to his trailer on 2 separate occasions, then killed them. He dismembered the victims, stored the meat in plastic Tupperware containers, and kept them in a freezer. The remaining parts were buried in a shallow grave in the woods behind the company. Metheny confessed that in the following weeks, he opened an outdoor grill stand, selling beef and pork sandwiches. However, he mixed some of the victims' meat into those sandwiches. Metheny calmly said, "Their meat tastes a lot like pork. If you mix it in, no one would be able to tell the difference." He continued this gruesome practice until he ran out of ingredients. But he didn't stop there. Metheny continued planning his next murders. One of his victims was Kimberly Spicer, a 23-year-old prostitute. After luring Kimberly to his trailer with the promise of heroin, he killed her. Kimberly's body was hidden underneath the trailer. Then on December 8th, Rita Kemper, a woman Metheny knew, agreed to come to his trailer. At the trailer, they used drugs together and talked. Metheny propositioned Rita for sex, but she refused. Angry, he initially told her to leave, but then suddenly lunged forward and dragged her back into the trailer. Inside, Metheny continued to abuse and try to force himself on Rita. As he tormented her, he laughed cruelly and threatened to kill her and bury her in the woods alongside the other women. However, Metheny's plan failed in a moment of distraction. He turned away, and that brief moment was all Rita needed to jump up and run out of the trailer. She got outside but was blocked by a 24-meter-high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Refusing to give up, Rita quickly spotted a stack of wooden pallets beside the fence. She climbed the pallets, jumped over the fence, and made her escape. At this moment, a contradiction appears in Metheny's testimony. In his confession letter, he recalled, "I climbed those pallets like a monkey, jumped over the fence, and chased after her down the main road. Someone in a pickup truck picked her up and took her to a nearby gas station to call the police. Knowing the cops were coming, I didn't run. I gathered her clothes and took the keys to open the gate. Just as I stepped out, a police car stopped. The officer jumped out, pointed a gun at me, and ordered me to lie down. And that's when it all ended." Most documents about Joe Metheny only mention this version of the story. However, another theory not only contradicts his account, but also reveals much darker details. Although Rita's escape unfolded consistently, there is suspicion that she didn't report to the police immediately as Metheny claimed. If that were true, Metheny would have been arrested that very night, December 8, 1996. However, the fact is Metheny wasn't arrested until December 15, 1996, when he was leaving a Christmas party hosted by his employer, Jose Stein and Son. Notably, his boss, Joe Stein Sr., was also arrested at the same time. To avoid confusion, we'll refer to him simply as Stein initially. Stein was charged with helping Metheny cover up evidence, but he was later acquitted due to lack of proof. However, Stein had a serious criminal record, including convictions for theft and armed robbery. After being released from prison, he founded the company Pallet Joe Stein Sons, but continued to be involved in illegal activities. His son, Joe Jr., also once followed in his father's footsteps down a criminal path, but later turned his life around. When Joe Jr. discovered that his father was still involved in illegal activities, he secretly met with FBI agent Jim Fitzsimmons and became an informant. Wearing a wire, he continued working at Joe Stein and Son, regularly reporting information to Fitzsimmons to aid the investigation. So what does all this have to do with Joe Metheny's case? We're about to find out. In fact, the FBI had no idea about Joe Metheny. Their main target was to take down Stein's criminal network. Everything changed when William Clinton Ashbrook, Joe Jr., as brother-in-law, approached him with a shocking secret The night before, Metheny and Clinton had been drinking and using drugs together at the pallet company office. In his drunken state, Metheny confessed that he had just killed a young woman and was still hiding her body on the company grounds. He wanted to dispose of the body and asked Clinton for help. When Metheny led Clinton to the hiding place, Clinton was so horrified he was left speechless. He hurriedly fled the scene on his motorcycle. Surprisingly, Metheny didn't seem worried about what had happened, as mentioned earlier, after being acquitted. Metheny applied to work as a night security guard and forklift operator at his old company. Some even believed that Stein had hired him as an enforcer. When Clinton told Joe Jr. about what happened, Joe Jr. immediately introduced him to the FBI agents he was working with. Clinton agreed to wear a wire, and thanks to that, the police successfully recorded Metheny's confession. This significantly shifted the scope of the FBI's investigation. Even though Joe Jr. kept providing evidence against Stein, including claims that his father had threatened his enemies through acts of arson, the authorities still didn't have enough proof at the time to charge Stein with grand theft. However, the discovery of a potential serial killer living right on the premises of the company they were investigating forced the FBI to act quickly. As mentioned earlier, Stein and Metheny were arrested on December 15, 1996. The initial charge against Stein for being an accomplice was later dropped due to a lack of evidence proving he had any knowledge of Metheny's actions. Metheny himself never mentioned his boss during questioning. However, Stein was still sentenced to 10 years in prison for conspiring to burn 2 trucks belonging to a man he believed had betrayed him. 2 other employees of GE Industries were also convicted of stealing goods from the company. Another individual pled guilty to breaking into Stein's sister-in-law's home to steal firearms. Clinton Ashbrook, along with an accomplice, was convicted of arson. All of these arrests were based on information provided by Joe Jr. In return, the FBI rewarded him and his family with $60,000 and placed them in the Witness Protection Program. However, Joe Jr.'s actions led to him being shunned by friends and family. As a result, in 1999, Joe Jr., Donna, and their children left Baltimore. After his arrest, Metheny was immediately taken to the Baltimore police station for questioning. Surprisingly, he began confessing to his crimes in chilling detail and agreed to lead the police to the victims' burial sites. At first, the police didn't find any bodies, but on their second search, they discovered Kimberly Spicer's body hidden beneath Metheny's trailer. Next, they found the remains of Catherine Magaziner. Though her skull was missing, her identity was confirmed through dental records from her lower jaw. She had been missing for over 2 years. The police also scoured the Patapsco River near the Hanover Street Bridge, where Metheny claimed he had dumped the bodies of 3 victims killed in 1995. However, they found no trace of them. One theory is that Metheny may not have secured enough weight to the bodies, causing them to be carried away out to sea. Metheny eventually confessed to killing a total of 10 people. Among them, police charged him with the murder of Tony Lynn Ingracia, who was attacked and restrained to death near Highway 95 in 1994. Not far from the pallet company, in 1997, Metheny was put on trial for charges including kidnapping, intentional murder, and assault of Rita Kemper, as well as the murder of Kimberly Spicer, although acquitted of the intentional murder charge for Rita. Metheny was still convicted on other charges related to her and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Additionally, he received a life sentence for the murder of Kimberly Spicer. Metheny was not convicted in the Tony Lynn Ingracia case, but after confessing to killing Catherine Magaziner, he had to face a separate trial the following year. Although Metheny pleaded guilty to the robbery and murder of Catherine Magaziner, he insisted on being tried by a jury. The robbery charge made him eligible for the death penalty. In fact, this was exactly what he wanted. In August 1998, his wish came true. He was sentenced to death. "I take lives because I enjoy it. It gives me a rush like being on drugs. There's no other reason, I just like doing it. However, by February 2000, his death sentence was reduced to life in prison after the robbery charge was dropped over the years. Methany's weight climbed to over 200 kilograms, making his infamous photo go viral online on August 5, 2017. Metheny was found unconscious in his cell at the Western Correctional Institution. He was later confirmed dead at the age of 62. Joe Metheny was not just a serial killer, he was proof that monsters can hide in plain sight, right within society, without anyone knowing. Just think about it. If Metheny hadn't targeted prostitutes and the homeless, could he have hidden his crimes for so long? Could it be that society's indifference and prejudice toward these vulnerable groups unintentionally created the perfect environment for such crimes to thrive, making them easy prey? If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming content. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.